I was able to get the bell housing off. Now, I did cut me a hole big enough for my hand to get in there. I want some room to work on that thing. I'm going to check it over here. I got to grind the top of it to make it fit that plate with the way that pipe comes in there. We're waiting on our bolts. I contacted Performance Adapters. These bolts, there need to be 2 inches. I guess they didn't account for the bolts coming this way. They thought we were just going to tap it in there. I mean, if I had a machine shop and the tools and a lathe and some way to measure the thread pitch on the flat bolts he sent, I probably could make an insert that would go in that block. But, you know, honestly, let's just talk about longer bolts with nuts. Same style, hopefully. And he said he was going to send those out. Now, with the way that plate is, you know, you need room from the bottom side. You could put the torque converter back on the transmission and bolt this up to that plate, bolt the torque converter to the plate. But we don't want to tear this front pump seal up. I've had to do them that way. You know, we got a motor out of a junkyard one time. It was stuck on there too tight. We didn't have time to wait. We stuck it on there. It was no problems. So, it did work. But, we're going to take and clean that up with a flat disc. We got to knock some top off of it to get it to bolt up to our plate. We're waiting on them bolts. He said he would send me some out. So, appreciate him taking care of me on that. He said I could go to Ace Hardware or something, but, you know, it's pretty nice. I would kind of like the matching bolts, but, you know, if it's not, as long as it fits the hole, it's got nuts on it, we can tighten it down, I'm good. I don't get excited about most things. The only thing is it's got like a Allen head style bolt that goes in there. I don't really care for those. I'd rather have a regular style. But that's what they did, whatever. Far as looking at it, everything, the bell housing does fit. It just won't fit with that pipe in there. You got to take some off them, clean it up with the flat disc, keep, you know, kind of clean it up. So probably going to wait a couple more days on that. It gives me plenty of time to make that little hole just as smooth and pretty as we can get her. But I was able to use the plasma cutter on that, and then I finished it up with a sawzall to kind of get through the ribs on it. So it looks a little rough, but we're going to clean that up with a flap. Take some off the top of it here so we can hopefully get it to bolt up to our plate with not too much more effort. And it's kind of thin to the inside there. So, anywho, we're just going to keep plugging along. If I had them flat bolts in it, you get that bell housing fitting, daggone, you could really just go ahead and stick it down in there. Now, I'm going to use these motor mounts off the Colorado because they fit the hole on the frame rail. You know, if I got to cut those or whatever I got to do to make that fit on this block, there's holes for it. So, we'll try to figure out something as far as getting those two together and making them beautiful. And hopefully get it to where I can mount it on the side for the motor mounts on both sides. Because it's easier to see on this side, but it's got mounting plates all up, spots all over it. I mean, you could just take you a plate, burn you some holes in it, and then put that motor mount up there and weld it to that plate that you make. And then you could use the factory bolts to bolt it back into the frame. I think it would be better. Both sides same way. So, we'll figure out something. Might take some fabricating, some cobbling. Try to make it look decent. It ain't got to be perfect. Just no truck. Then we got to take our dash out. Take that wiring harness out. I got those 2 side pieces that we cut off our donor. I might have to weld those in to hang that wiring harness across it. Then we'll completely pull the wiring harness out and run a whole new wiring harness for that. Gets rid of the body control module, and it just simplifies what we're trying to do. You know, that whole wiring harness would plug up to that motor and run it. And then, you know, as far as getting the power steering hooked up, and then, motor mounts, power steering, and then the wiring harness. Shouldn't be that big a deal. Now, I'm maybe going to try to take 2 wiring harnesses and make one. Just pull a power off of that wiring harness and put it on it. I might try that first, and then take it apart, de-pin it, whatever we got to do to make everything work, But I think with this truck, it runs through the body control module to make everything work. So who knows? We'll figure out something. I'll put that whole wiring harness in there. You eventually get it working if you play with it enough. So be a lot of effort to get that dash out and pull that bar off there, pull the steering column out, do all that jazz. But that's what we got to do. It is what it is. I don't want to do it. You can't even buy like for that correlation code that I had on that motor. It's got like a VVT thing to it, to where it does so much and it adjusts the valve timing on the fly. It's too complicated. I mean, I know people that can make it work, but you got to get a body control module, and then they're always on back order. They keep having problems with the body control module. We're swapping it out. We're going to go with that motor. Now, that motor there, you can put a blower on it. You can put turbos on it. They make kits where it's just put it on there, rig it up somehow, and, you're good to go. With a fuel pump, you got to tune it. If you put turbos, it's got to pull out vacuum and add fuel and, blah, blah, blah. If you know how to do it, you know how to do it. You'd have to have a dyno, I did have a buddy that had one of these. He had a 5-cylinder. He had it dynoed. He had the bigger brakes, the high flow exhaust, updated pedal, updated throttle body. It was 400 horsepower with the 5-cylinder. That thing was a beast. I really want. He priced it. I was like, man, I almost bought it. And he had all the receipts. He's like, buddy, it's ready to go. Drive it. Took it up a road. About fell in love. Nice little truck. Single cab. And then I know a buddy that had a 5.3 in one of these, and, the motor was just so heavy. If you've got a light motor in these trucks, it just feels sexual, okay? We're not doing all that. We're just basically wanting something we can drive here before I get too carried away and start daydreaming here. Just basically put the motor in. Hopefully we can get it going good enough to where we can drive it around and enjoy it. It's old. I see people putting a lot of effort into these older trucks, but, let's be honest. Sometimes it's worth it. I mean, if you was to take and bust it all apart once you got it all hooked up, sandblast the frame and dip the cab in acid, do all that jazz, I'd say, wow. But, let's do the numbers on it. It would be a lot. In the real world, I'd like to have a 4L80. Get it all-wheel drive dynoed up to like 500. That's what you can do with them motors. Now, if you had something like that, I think you'd have something fun. It'd be ready to ride. But on the transfer case now, they do make a kit to where it's got a cable-style transfer case, but it offers a neutral on the transfer case, like for towing. And then, you would have to get... full-size Chevrolet, they offer a piece that you can screw in to engage the hubs full-time. And then that way when you pull that baby up in 4 high, 4 low, or whatever you want to do, 2-wheel drive, it'll do it. And you don't have to have nothing extra. It's got that little box right there. That little thing right there. It's got an electrical plunger that pushes in the hubs, just like a full-size. So, if you was to do all that, I was trying to maybe contact a guy about making me something to just engage that. I've even seen them to where they had like a lever. You could, if you want to climb under it. Somebody that does trail ride, they don't care to get dirty or something, but sometimes it works great, sometimes it don't. The electric box on the transfer case, they don't work that great. They get wet, driving in the rain, driving in the snow, whatever. I mean, if it's dry out, beautiful. But if you're out four-wheeling, I took us up on the hill once. And, I went through just a little bit of mud, and it wouldn't come out of 4 high. Once it dried out, it was beautiful. So we need to figure out a way to do that. You can do it with the factory transfer case. I mean, if you was to buy an aftermarket or just to put a half-ton transfer case in it, you know, you got to have an adapter from the transmission to that transfer case, and then you got to run a bastard U-joint or have driveline made to where it's got the U-joint in it. It's a lot, you know. Some of them old Fords, you know, you can just bolt a plate on there. It's got a lever on it, and you can shift it with just rig up something to where you have a shifter, and it'll go. You can do the same thing with that. It's just got a sprocket on it. You can put a keyway on it. However, go to a machine shop. I know a guy. I might get him to rig me up something to where you can just shift it with just a lever in the floor. You know, it ain't got to be something special. It's just got to be right enough to get that to click back and forth 2-3 times. 2-wheel drive, 4 high, 4 low. All the way back 4 low on these, I think. As far as when you shift it back in there, you just rig up something. I mean, I can do that. That's not out of my league, but you know, I don't have a lathe to make the little piece to where it would just come up there with just a slot, you know, just like any type of whatever. Or you could put a bolt in it to where, you know, you could do it. There's a million ways to skin a cat. But that little kit, it's pretty nice. It's a pretty slick cable. I mean, that's nice. And I mean, it just makes more sense to use what you got. And, you know, if you need parts or whatever, you can just find another Colorado, if you know what I'm saying. But that's probably going to be a day. I'll bring you back whenever we get that cleaned up and get it fit into that plate. But we can't do nothing until we get the rest of our bolts. Once we get that, I will fit that up. Get it to where it'll bolt up to it, make sure we're good, and then it'll be ready to go in. Now this right here, it sticks out quite a bit. We added some to that, but I don't know. And then we got to get the motor mounts. Get that bolted up, get the motor mounts. Get the motor mounts, we start hooking everything up. You know, we could probably just hook that wiring harness up just right outside here, put some gas into it, and see if it'll start. We get it started, we know we're getting ready to do whatever. Now to shift that transmission, you know, I see the toggle setups, they just toggle switch everything. May have to do that, but to get like a TPS thing, it's like external, you got to hook it to the throttle body, and it's got to have a cable. You know, they make a 700 R4 that's got like a cable on it, and the old 4L60 has a cable. You know, if you was to find a cable, it'd bolt right up to that. It's the same thing. The E is electronic. So, they even put those in a half-ton. They went all 4L60Es, got all the electronic stuff. 4L80, if you look at a 460, you know, the 4L60 is basically an old turbo 350. The 4L80 is basically a 400 turbo for old-timers, you know, to understand what you're really talking about. The 700 R4, it's got a cable that when you give it gas, you know, that's how it does it. It's got to be pretty much perfect to shift the transmission right or tear it up. Same thing with the old school 4L60. It's the same thing. It's got a cable style shifter. It's got to be hooked to the throttle body to know what you're doing. And it's got to be adjusted. I've done it before. It's not a big deal. But we're just going to try to use what we got for now.